silent so it doesn't during the stream. It's happened before.
Yeah.
Which group? Oh, my phone automatically tells me that Matt Bailey is live.
That's how much you love me. That's how it works. Ladies and gentlemen, hello everyone. Welcome. My name's Matt Bailey. I'm the National Ambassador for the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. I'm covering again for the second week in a row now for Scott Fitzsimons, who's our usual moderator and host for Whisky Roundtable. This is week 5. The idea behind Roundtable is that we get together with a group of friends, others who work in the trade, to talk about some of the subjects surrounding spirits, surrounding the bar scene, surrounding all the things that are good to whiskey, and of course some other spirits and other discussions that arise out of it. We encourage questions, we encourage comments. Please keep them coming in. There was heaps last week, which was fantastic. And we're gonna take a moment now. I'm just gonna expand the screen out so we can see everyone, and I'm gonna get everyone to actually, like we do each week, to introduce themselves so we can get a so you know who you're talking to, and so you can also direct some questions at these people. You can be watching this right now shortly on Sydney Bartender Exchange, Melbourne Bartender Exchange, Scotch Malt Whisky Society, Australia. So I'm going to...
I can't do that.
Okay, we'll get there. We'll get there. Okay, so I might start with my top left. Emma, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Emma Cookson from Whisky and Ailment over in Melbourne. That's about it for me.
Okay, cool. Alex.
Hey guys, Alex Dallenberg. I am from the Olna and the Speakeasy Group, and also Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
Awesome. Andy.
Hey, I'm Andy Milne. I'm the brand manager for South Trade, and so I look after Paul John from India, Old Pulteney, Anox, Bayburn from Scotland, Kurioshi from Japan, Buffalo Trace from the States. I feel like I've forgotten some, and Dublin Liberties from Ireland as well.
The big BT, yes. Lockie, hit us up.
Hi, I'm Lachlan. I am the venue manager at Whisky and Ailment in Melbourne, and I'm also the Melbourne representative Wonderland's drinks brands. So North Star Whiskey, Shelter Point Whiskey, and a few other fun things as well.
Awesome. And our special guest tonight, Laura Thomason. Please welcome and tell us where you come from, what you do, and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Laura Thomason. I am director of Spirits Box, which is a company that imports craft spirits into mainland China. Very
cool. So we've got a very diverse group, as always, every week. And some of the questions, some of the subjects tonight were surrounding bars of the future, consumer habits, looking to the future, taking your questions live, etc., like that. So let's start. Let's kick it off. Andy, let's kick off with sort of current scene, future scene, what you see as bars of the future. Now, this can be related to current subject in terms of where what bars look like a year ago and what they look like now, of course, is very different. So where do you see that trajectory heading? And I'll start with Andy on that.
I wasn't expecting to get the start first. Let me just get this started. I'm useless at social media, but I think I've maybe correctly clicked the right buttons.
Okay. Just making sure all the streams are working, folks. We're all getting there.
You're muted as well now. Even better.
I'm muted.
Buzz, what's going on? So I don't know. I think it's a really interesting time now. And I think the last year has been about sort of range and size of the back bar, and I feel there's been a big sort of element of we've got the biggest whiskey list, we've got the biggest selection of American whiskies, we've got the biggest selection of independent whiskies and so forth, and it's been a great thing for customers to go in and be like, cool, this is broad breadth of spirits from bar to bar. From a cost perspective, it's easy to collect that and gather that over the years. Now that we've enjoyed a pretty tough few months, I'm intrigued to see whether that's going to be able to be maintained through the majority of venues, and whether actually they'll be able to keep up with that level of stock, but also whether it'll be sort of just concentrated, and whether we're sitting there going, okay, actually what's important to us, what delivers a GP that is helpful and is useful, and then what is, rather than picking the 50 gins that we think make sense, let's reduce it down to 10 gins that we actually really love. And it's that sort of cyclical motion of sometimes having everything is great because then you can please everyone, but do we want to go back to actually just going, this is what, and it's what as bartenders, that's what you're there for, to guide us as a consumer.
Yeah.
So you're the experts in knowing this, rather than having so much variety. It's a case of, no, we pick these because these are our 5 favorite or our 10 favorites. I think it's easier with gin vodka than it is, white spirits are easier than dark, but
Are they?
do
Are
we
white
see
spirits easier than dark in that regard to pick from now? I mean, with the range growing as it is?
it's harder to pick from, but it's in the way that it's probably been consumed across the vast majority of venues. It's easier to mix to that sort of palatability of the consumer. You have a citrus-led gin, you have a juniper-led gin, you have a sort of floral-led gin, and you've kind of covered most of the bases. So, with whiskey, obviously, it's a completely different picture. But do we go and rein it in and say this is what we think is actually more important to what our customer wants?
Okay. Alex, you've been in bars for quite some time in this regard, and you've seen the evolution of that, especially with your venues. What does it look like for you? What's the future of bars look like at the moment?
I think we're all in a little bit uncharted territory right now. None of us have ever sort of experienced this. I think some of the things that we are looking at is we are going to have reduced trading when we first come back into it. We're starting to put together our action plans now for Speakeasy Group to get back into how we're going to go back into the consumer trade and open our doors. And I think that'll be at a reduced trading hours for the moment until we start building it back out again. I think we've got a lot of people that won't trust straight away to get out and keep going. I imagine we're going to have a huge hit. Most of us youngins, well, I'll call myself young for the moment, for the best part of this story. Most of us will want to just get out and have that quick out we go. But I think a lot of the population will also stay home for a little bit longer, stay safe. And I think we're walking into something we don't know. I feel that we kind of hit a beautiful peak in hospitality. And I think we've got a long slog to get it back up to where it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you think about money, we've all been sort of on reduced dollars, or the ones that haven't been on reduced dollars, they're going to be great for our industry because they probably save some money, save some dollars staying at home. But we're probably looking at reduced trade for 12 to 18 months. And that's just based on Australia. Like, we don't know what's going to happen with the global economy and how much it's going to affect us.
I read an interesting one this morning that was about the applications for JobKeepers, and the biggest category was surprisingly accountants and lawyers. So it came under a mixed umbrella term that I can't recall now, but it's effectively saying it's legal professionals, accountants, lawyers were the highest category. I don't know if it's because the accountant's always looking after the dollar, and so they're the first one in. And
that's your answer right there.
But it's a high spending group of customers that actually it flagged in my mind of just like, oh, that's a concern because of that customer base.
Yeah.
We've got a question that says, do you think we'll have virtual taste? Do you think we'll see virtual tastings thrive after venues are trading again? Yes. I think a lot of our world is going to stay quite virtual. We've got companies that have now sent staff home that are now working from home. They may not need that huge office space anymore. People may be able to stay home. We've had to adapt our entire lives right now online. And I feel that we've seen companies shift from sort of that brand ambassador into that co-role of either sort of part-time brand ambassador or a brand ambassador with sales capacity. We've seen the alcohol industry shift that way. And I think that we're going to end up with a lot of other industries sort of dropping down because they don't need to have that manpower now. Everything's done virtually.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree, but Emma, it'd be good to get your opinion on this. For doing a tasting in a venue, you're supporting as a marketeer, we're supporting a venue of someone that supports our products, and so that's important to us to support our customers. But also, you're then having people through the doors. You're then probably having people consume that product in your venues, and more likely to get more customers drinking that liquid in your venue over a period of time. And it creates more revenue for your business rather than just putting a name to it, because as we could put anyone's name to a tasting, and obviously you have the customers that we can advertise to, but only if you set up for that capacity. So for a bar to advertise, it's a lot easier to do it that way. But it's how if tastings went more virtually, how do you think that would impact WA?
I think, well, at the moment we've got a virtual online tasting booked in. I think it's hard because you don't know which way people are going to swing. I think I completely agree with Alex. For the first while, there is going to be this whole stigma of, I really want to go out for a drink, but is this okay? Am I, you feel like you're breaking the law. But I think yes, virtual tastings will have a place, and I think that it's hard. I don't think it's going to be as huge afterwards as it is currently, obviously, because I think that there's something a lot more meaningful in meeting that person and being there face to face. A lot of the tastings that we have, people say it was really nice to chat to the person afterwards, and that's not something you would get one-on-one in a virtual tasting. And I think that's something that people will never really shift away from. They've been tastings where people are like, sign my bottle, or can I get a photo with you, and stuff like that. And that's just not something you can do over technology. I think these online tastings are amazing, but I think the solid person in front of you kind of interaction that you wouldn't get otherwise is going to be enough that it's still viable in the post-COVID economy.
One thing I've seen, like within China, obviously they're a couple of months ahead of where we are at the moment, and how some bars have actually come through this and given amazing examples of how you can push forward, how you can brand through being shut, how you can keep your name out there through different partnerships with different spirit brands or like collabs, and just kind of keeping solid online presence. And a big part of that has been virtual tastings. I know the guys behind Hope and Sesame down in Guangzhou, they've been absolutely amazing at kind of keeping themselves with an online presence. But a big part of that was how they partnered with different spirit brands and held the virtual tastings, which not only like they would bottle up little bits of cocktails, anything that could travel, and it would be sent out all across China. And like they'd have to give 2 weeks because of timing and whatnot, but it meant that they could do these tasting sessions and these training sessions for people who live in regional areas or don't have an opportunity to travel to the bar, and kind of created this much broader net of consumers. Suddenly
in some ways that's kind of like even broadened the reach of the bar pre-COVID.
Yeah.
And that's Lockie, I'll just jump to you here for a second. Your juice bags at Whisky and Helmet is a good example of that. There they are, where you've got now people buying those interstate.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So we are actually sending about 50% of those, to my understanding, interstate.
That's awesome.
At least from what I've seen, which is really cool. And most of them are our consumer basis anyway, which travel to our bar maybe once a year or maybe twice a year. But these guys are now buying from us once a week and buying flights or Boilermakers or, you know, jumping onto our online sessions to try and educate themselves while also enjoying some whiskey, which has been pretty fun. Yeah, it's definitely broadened. It's allowed our broader community to involve themselves in our venue. So,
Yeah,
question coming through from Hayden. He asks, on the topic of growing the industry, how are Australian distilleries going to survive in a market that is becoming highly saturated, especially post COVID-19, with discretionary spending likely to fall? The big one.
Yeah, that lack of disposable income is a big concern for a lot of businesses, you know.
Especially
I think-
with fires we had flooding. We're going to do it tough, I think, in the Australian distilling industry. And this is where I think as us as bars, this is where we need to get involved. And maybe increase reaches of these guys and their visibility to keep them up and running and support them through this time. In saying that, there are some ones doing great jobs in getting themselves out there during this time as well. So anything that we can do as Australians to support our own distilling industry right now is huge, whether that's buying at home or buying in our bars. For us, we're quite heavily contracted with our cocktails. So where I like to be able to do it is put it on the back line and train the teams. And then the moment you put a bottle in with my teams and someone comes and trains them, they're instantly selling that straight away. So I think in bars, as brands and venue owners and operators, I think to get Australia through this time, we need to jump in behind them.
Yeah, entirely.
It'd be a great time also because at the moment the government is doing a lot of changes to different regulations, and like when you think back to what was it 20 or 30 years ago when there was when the wine industry was severely under pressure, and that's when the government changed the tax regulations for the wine industry. Now would be a fantastic time for them to actually petition to change the tax codes that severely disadvantages Australian distillers.
Yeah. I think they have quite a strong voice with the government at the moment, purely because they've, so many of them have been producing hand sanitizer, and so they're having this really strong conversation of, from their side, it's so positive. It's like, we're helping you, we're adapting for you. What you require, we will deliver for you. So the chairman of the Australian Distillers Association has played a pivotal role in that, and then communicating that to distillers. So it'll be interesting to see what the next step is for them. It's just like, okay, how do we take that conversation further and sort of go, okay, we've done all these things we've done for you. It's just like, here's our little. This is
The other side's the one that's going to pinch, I think.
I was in Coles the other day and they had no name hand sanitizer on there, and I think it was just a refill pump. And because hand sanitizers are so heavily perfumed, and I struggle with perfume, I'd still done the shop, and I was like, oh, do I do it? Do I not? Pumped some, rubbed my hands on it, walked away, and I'm like, oh my God, new make. Like, all I could see. Like a weirdo.
Ethanol,
Hi, Jane Overeem. Welcome to the chat.
Yeah, welcome, Jane. Yeah,
welcome.
Speaking of Australian distilling.
There was a comment that came through here. It says, bushfires, floods, COVID-19, can't wait for COVID-20. Well,
Mate,
sure.
At least we don't have murder hornets. We can be thankful for no murder hornets.
We've also had Chernobyl with their wildfires raising up a cloud of radiation swirling over Europe. So that's really fun.
On the plus side, they may have found a cure for malaria. So,
Hey.
Let's look on the bright side of that, hey?
Stop one of those plagues.
Yeah.
So that's an immediate future thing, really. It's kind of that discussion around what the next sort of steps look like. I think Alex sort of you articulated that quite well in terms of, you think there's going to be some trepidation, there's going to be some sort of we'll see a return to form, but it might take 12 to 18 months for a lot of people who usually came to bars to really start to go, well, I've got some disposable income again. I feel safe going to one again, all that kind of stuff. But Laura, you said that China is, it's ahead of where we are in this process. So what does that look like at the moment in terms of the next steps for you then?
So, well, what China looks like at the moment in regards to its operating, it changes, it's different, it differs city by city. I can speak well on what Shanghai looks like at the moment because my friends are down there and keeping me informed of what's going on. So essentially face masks in public are compulsory, but it's normal to wear a face mask in China. That's not culturally, it's a bit of a sticking point in Australia, which I find quite strange.
Yeah.
Because it's just you're protecting other people from yourself. So you operate under the assumption that you have it, and you're protecting yourself from other people. Protecting other people from yourself if you go out into public.
Yeah.
So if you go out to the bars, at the moment, I think they're actually up to opening full-scale venues now as well. But it was a staggered increase. It went from places that were under 20 people, then up to 50, then they went to 100. And once there was no community spread, once they hit the 100 venue mark, then they opened the city back up normally. Whenever you go out to a bar, you have your temperature taken and you need to put your name and phone number down. But also everything operates on your phone in China. So you'll you have QR codes. I'll pull up mine to show.
Because WeChat, you now have to have ID for that, don't you?
Yeah. So everyone's got a QR code. If you've had contact with someone that does have, who's been diagnosed with COVID, your QR code will change color and you need to go get yourself tested and you'll be quarantined. And they have specific quarantine hotels. You're not allowed to leave the room. Food comes to your door. You have no interaction with anyone.
It's like Scotty's COVID app, isn't it, in some ways?
Yeah.
There's a couple of questions coming through, which I'll jump on as well here. There's one here from Alex Moores and one from Jeremy Jung from Lark. I'll grab Alex's first because it came through first. Hi guys, what will that virtual change later in the role? Change the role of Whisky ambassadors, alter the role. Sorry, he's edited it, of Whisky ambassadors, because being so online means the distillers and producers can only present personally by video. So do you think that this is do you think that's even like an incident like this, like COVID-19, is going to change the role of Whisky ambassadors? Or in your case, Laura, maybe even spirits ambassadors or anything else really, but
I mean, so much of it is still relationship building. At the end of the day, when you're a BA, 95% of your job is relationship building, which you still do at the moment. It's just online.
Being a new BA must be bloody hard.
Pardon?
Being a new BA must be bloody impossible.
Yeah. It'd be pretty hard to break into the BA market at the moment. It'd be interesting to see how people's networks and the spread of their networks changes things. But there's a lot to be discovered in the coming year.
Yeah,
it's a whole new world we're walking into right now.
it is entirely.
I will say one thing that I think is probably a positive for this new virtual way of doing things, especially in regards to ambassadors and spirits reps and all that kind of stuff, is if it's on the internet, it's there forever. So, there's
that includes tonight, guys. So
yeah, exactly. That's the thing. So, if I, was curious about it and whatnot, things could pop up, virtual tastings, all that kind of stuff. It's in the internet. It's there forever. But, you don't have that permanence in a face-to-face interaction. And so I think hopefully that kind of provides a new a new way of access for brand ambassadors to reach consumers. But, it's a little thing, but I think it could be good.
It means you're more thoughtful about what you say as well.
Exactly.
I always find it a bit weird when people trash other brands. And and you know what they're talking about when they're trashing them. It's like, well, you know,
Yeah.
we all have an
Yeah.
opinion. It's, you know, everyone is very much entitled to their opinion, but when your role is educating and
I
talking,
love Spayburn. Just in case anyone,
I'm to a retailer near you soon. Don't you worry.
yeah,
The new juice is actually really good.
I bet. I can't wait to taste it. I love it.
It's surprised a lot of people. Yeah, thanks for the plug.
No, of course. Just on that, I'll follow up from Jeremy's comment though. Do you think down the track the consumers will preference more affordable blends rather than single malts like back in the 80s? Do you? So that's part of a broader.
That's a really cool question.
Do you think that we might see sort of a preference for, as we were talking about before, as consumer spending? Well, there's a lot of predictions at the moment, of course, but overall discretionary spend might be lower in sort of like 6 to 9 to 12 months from now. So do you think that we might see a preference towards more affordable blends? Even if we're talking mass market, we're talking Johnny Walkers and Chivas Regals of the world. Do you think we'll see more of a preference for those again? Emma, kick off with you.
I mean, like I think those markets have had a core consumer base, and they'll continue to have that core consumer base. I think people are.
Well, we're in the minority. People who drink single are already in the small portion of that market by a long shot.
I think in my kind of perspective, putting myself in those shoes, I would probably, as someone who drinks a lot of single malt and whatnot, would probably move towards those more no age statements, younger bottlings and stuff like that are, really affordable, really accessible, and still really good. Like one of my favorite whiskeys is a 5-year-old Bunnahabhain. But I think that's kind of potentially a market that people could move towards. But I think people might be more, kind of crafty about what blended whiskeys they do kind of move towards, because especially from that kind of higher consumer level, the people who are used to drinking, your indie bottlings aren't going to move back to your Johnnies and your Chivas. It's just not going to happen. But I think they're going to be more crafty about what they purchase.
Sure.
Yeah.
Alex, what's your take on this? Do you think we'll see a change in drinking habit as a result of this?
I do.
Okay.
Well and truly. We will have almost like the MasterChef effect. We had everyone cooking for themselves at home and not going out to the restaurants as much because
more illegal home stills, huh? Yeah, cool.
On a venue basis. We've also been forced into probably the most amount of time at home with our loved ones. And I think that it could be a good change for us as society, right? Getting off phones and spending time with our loved ones. But I think habits will be changed, and a lot of people will or are getting used to staying at home and spending that time. So I think that everyone's upskilled almost, and I'm pretty damn sure they've upskilled in making their own drinks. And
not well. I mean, but they have. I still can't make a great cocktail. I'll be the first to admit that. That's fine.
Yeah, but you've got to love it. It's just about you loving it.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think yes, we are going to have an emergence in blends with some people that are getting into whiskey or would need whiskey for their cocktails.
Yep.
And I think that's where we're going to see, we were talking last week, Lockie, you were talking about an Australian blended whiskey. We need one of those.
Yeah.
I think that
it is my dream in life to see that actually come to fruition.
You're a young chap. Give it time.
I think that we are going to see a rise in blended whiskies purely because people are spending at home and they're not going to be spending that $30 across the bar, $30 to $50 across the bar for a nip. They'll be buying at home and buying a bottle.
Yeah.
Lockie, you're kind of at the coalface of this with Emma at Whisky and Ailment. Do you think that rather than from an off-premise perspective from your case, in your professional capacity, do you think you're going to see a change in buying habits from your side of the bar?
Oh, from outside the bar, no, not really. I think what we'll continue to do is try and champion independent brands and independent producers and also independent bottlers, and try and provide a unique experience that people can't get at home. And therefore, we'll be avoiding things that are more accessible. But the one kind of thing I wanted to kind of add to that was we have seen a massive, just prior to this entire COVID thing, we saw a bunch of brands over the last year, 12 months to, or I guess 24 months, release more affordable Australian products that can be bought for less than $100, that are Australian whiskies, produced here, blended here, et cetera, that are actually incredible whiskies, like Twofold, which started this resurgence of affordable Aussie whiskey. Fantastic product, and I could not champion that more. The Gospel with their rye spirit, and Archie Rosen, etc. These are all incredible whiskies that have come out that will be really good products for people to work with at home. And I think we are starting to see a move away, even prior to this, we're starting to see a move away from people just buying incredibly expensive whiskey to just have at home. People were going to be drinking more affordable whiskeys and then have their special bottles they pull out on special occasions.
Well, there's actually a question that will tie into that, but I just want to hear from Laura on this in terms of what do you see as the pattern changing in your capacity, both here and in China, maybe?
In regards to markets, it's very different for China. So China is quite a young, like in regards to education around products, China is quite a young market, but it's also quite a like hungry market. So China is so much more focused on having really individual experiences, but it's very branded. So the big brands are absolute king. So whilst there's a lot of that, like they do like for individual purchase, the big brands do hold like absolute presence. For smaller bottles, you'll find some amazingly well-stocked whiskey bars. So it honestly, it's.
But do you think we're going to see a shift downwards? Well, not downwards isn't the right word, but a shift back to more affordable blended whiskey market like we saw in the 1980s?
For China, it's still moving up, like because at the moment China isn't moving back to the blended whiskies; they're stepping into them at the moment for the vast majority of the market. So yes, there is a small pocket of people who are extremely wealthy, and having single malts is a part of their lexicon and their drinking. But the majority of the population are still learning what Western spirits are. At the same time, like when you think about baijiu, which is the highest consumed spirit globally, and it's only drunk in China. A lot of the population is still learning how to taste Western spirits.
Only because a lot of people have joined the stream just recently. I just want to welcome everyone who's been tuning into Whisky Roundtable Week 5. I'm sitting here tonight with Alex Dallenberg, Andy Milne, Emma Cookson, Lockie Watt, and Laura Thompson, talking all things good spirits, all things Whisky Roundtable, all things future of bars. Big shout out. Hello, David Taylor, Seamus Carroll, El Tote, Richard Matthews, lots of people from the trade joining in as well, which is great. There was a question which popped up here.
Matt, I'll just jump in just before you dive into the next question. Just from a perspective of looking at scan and looking at retail scan over the last 6 weeks.
Yep.
It was really interesting to watch, in sort of big retailers and looking at their sales out. So not our sales to them, but their sales out from the store over the last 6 weeks. And you look at a bit of data and you sort of go, okay, this is interesting. So the very beginning of lockdown and us going to working from home, we saw a huge demand in sort of mainstream spirits, that you call it. So your everyday brands that sort of on that sort of $35-$45 mark. and it was very much, what can I afford and what can I have at home, so that I've definitely got 2 or 3 bottles of something at home ready to save me from my mental family or partner or housemates or whatever it might be. But what we've seen is actually that sort of that was a heavy wave in March, and April was actually kind of moved across, and we're looking at more premium brands, and I think people have made that step to, okay, this is a bit more life. I want something a bit nicer, and so people are upgrading to more premium products, and more premium whiskies are being purchased. So I think
We're certainly seeing
the
that
initial
best,
shock,
yeah,
and then it's like, okay, actually, no, I do want something good. So let's.
I also
let's
think that with all of our online tastings that are going around, and the education that's going around from bars and from producers and larger brands, people are actually getting these premium products and trying to learn about what they're drinking. And so people are trying to effectively upskill and learn about stuff.
You're probably hearing a lot more from you're hearing a lot more from the premium brands than you are from your everyday brands.
Exactly.
They can't
so people are trying
advertise
to
in a meaningful way other than, we're here for you in this tough time. It's like, sure you are.
It could also be another fun thing. It could be is those premium whiskey drinkers. Well, they've run out of everything on their shelf by April. They're just slowly getting through. Now they're like, crap, now I need to restock.
I know that feeling. Yeah.
Yeah.
A question from Regan Owens. He asks, a question for the panel: has anyone opened anything special that they were saving in their home bars or in the last few months? Has anyone opened anything that they thought, well, I'm stuck in isolation and I'm opening something nice kind of moment? I mean, Emma, you seem to already be sorted there. What have you got on your table there?
I've got so whenever I take a particular liking to a bottle of whiskey at work, typically I'll buy the last like half dram that's in it, and then just take the bottle home. But I don't drink that much at home, so they usually kind of sit there for a little bit, not too long, I promise. But I've got a Kingsbury from Japan 7-year-old Altavine and a 10-year-old Hazelburn Sauternes cask. But
that's where that went.
Yeah, that's where that went. But for me, I don't drink a lot at home, so I haven't cracked into that many. But also being in the process of moving, most of them are all wrapped up in bubble wrap. So these ones, I was like, nah, they have to go before I move house.
Andy.
Yeah, I'm in a similar position. Most of the time I'm consuming in venues and bars rather than at home. So although there's stuff that's opened with a small amount, and I think last time I had some friends over, I had a couple of single cask bottlings or special bottlings from Whisky Exchange, actually, from my old show. It was a 21-year-old Ben Nevis and a 11-year-old Lecheg.
Yep.
That are just superb, and I sort of kept them to share with friends. And now I'm just like, yeah, it's really good. I'm gonna keep drinking that. And normally it would probably just sit there for ages until the next people come to our house and we can share it with them. But it's that, and there's been quite a few minis and sort of small bottles. I buy a lot of minis as and when I can to just try weird things and unusual things. And so a lot of those that I've just been sitting on going, yeah, I'll have that at some point. I then just sort of go, yep, so let's try 3 or 4 minis in a night. And
I'm always torn on minis. I'm always torn. It's kind of like I love the idea of minis, but and then I meet mini collectors and they're weirder than I am. So I just go,
they are unique.
Unique. They're unique.
I've got, things like this. That's
that's an old Balvenie.
8-year-old pure malt Balvenie. So if I want to get into the business, I work for one of the biggest collectors of whiskey in the world, and so you get set down a rabbit hole because he just like, try this, try this, try this, try this. And you're like, shit, I can't afford any of this. And so you get privileged with all this amazing liquid, but then you can never purchase it again. So I realized that minis were my way to actually be able to sort of have a collection of some really cool stuff, so I can go, yeah, I'm going to drink that one day. I'm going to try that. And so you suddenly get 1960s, 1970s distillate.
Yeah.
Really interesting stuff. And
Yeah.
I can tell you, having opened various bits and bobs on these calls, some of them are terrible, utterly shocking.
Yeah, absolutely they are.
100%, yeah.
They do that. That's the other thing with minis. They're unreliable. That you just
Yeah, they are.
They are. They're totally
They
unreliable.
really are.
You can open up
And
some amazing things, and they just turn to they taste like mushy peas in a bottle, and you're like, oh, that was a shame.
Yeah. And you kind of buy it based on feel level and how it looks, but even then you're like, yeah, that looks good.
What was that, Alex? Sorry.
I love mushy peas.
I was about to say the same. I love mushy peas.
Okay, but you get what I mean. Maybe mushy peas sitting in a steel tin. I don't know. There's a certain flavor there, like that vegetal tin flavor that some of those minis give off. Laura, for yourself, have you been killing off anything?
Yes, I'm lucky enough to be staying with Joey Ty and Tom Scott, so there's been some delicious whiskies open. But me myself, I'm definitely more of a agave girl. So for my birthday, we cracked some Tapatio Añejo, and actually
fantastical.
We're actually blessed to have Tom's son Lachlan joining us tonight. So this is really great.
Dad who left.
Dad who left him.
Yeah.
I'm there today.
Alex, what have you been? I know I've seen a few things you've been opening, Alex, and having on display in some of your streams. So what's going on with you?
I'm drinking hot chocolate tonight. But I have started opening sample bottles this week that I have. I found don't hate me or
no
hate for this, but I found a bag of samples that was left for me in one of the venues, and so the team just put like any samples that are left for me in a bag, and any that I get given I put in a bag and I take them home. So I've started on that bag, and I remembered when I found it, but I have a sample bottle of the Ardbeg Wee Beastie that's not released yet.
Oh, I'm super excited to try this.
And the Ardbeg Black, which just has been.
Yeah.
But so that's what I started on this week.
I will be honest with you. It's not a thing. There is a Wee Beastie sample in the box up on the shelf over there.
You go on too. All right.
It's just an LVMH blank bottle, but I haven't opened it yet. I haven't had a chance.
Right. So I opened mine. Open it, Matt.
Open that.
Yeah. Young Ardbeg is the bollocks. So.
Very cool. Very cool.
Delicious. And I found some like old cast strength Sullivan's Cove sample bottle. So much. I've just got all these little bottles, and I have a gift exchange with some of my friends that I always have a handbag whiskey as well. So I'll take a little bottle out with me that's something special, and I'll give it to someone, and then they'll bring me back the bottle with something special to them in it. I had a beautiful black art this week from Andy Sy, who was Webster's, who's now with Brown Forman. So I drank that.
Very cool.
So drinking some cool stuff, but in the little ones.
A bit like Milne.
Is good for sharing.
Lockie, you've been apart from weird amarettos and peach sours, what else are you drinking?
I've been drinking some fun stuff. So I've done a little bit of what everyone said. I've opened some fun bottles. So I've been drinking this peated Ben Nevis Hidden Spirits. I also opened my bottle of 15th Anniversary Society Altmore, which was super fun.
All right.
And then I also got given a little, it's quite sizable sample bottle of the new Sullivan's Cove Refill American Oak. And so I was drinking that this week. And I found a bunch of sample bottles in the back of my cupboard. So I drank those last week and they were fun.
So half of us are drinking minis and old samples kicking around.
Yeah.
Dragging the dregs is what we call them. They kick around for ages.
They do.
Those things. Like when I moved house, I had my collection of whiskey that ended up going into storage because I moved from the UK to here. But I also had what I didn't realize was just this mass of samples, and it was sort of, I think 5 shoecases worth of samples were filled and just sort of placed somewhere in the house. I was like, here you are, parents, hide this somewhere. I'll come back to this. And then, you sort of think, oh, I don't normally store those, I don't normally keep onto these, but you do, because you only get a small amount. And so it's a sample, so you only get a small taste of it. If you can save a bit of it, it's just like, oh yeah, I've got a bit of this. It's like, like I had a really wacky tasting with Shinji Fukuyo from Suntory. And he kind of brought over these 3 samples. He's like, oh, these are 3 things that I'm working on, and I've got this weird little project and, doing some interesting things. Just want to get your feedback. And this was to my boss, not to me. It was not that important to him, but I was sitting there trying this liquid with him, and I was like, this is incredible. And my boss tried it and sort of went, yeah, cool. Held on to it. It's like, well, I've got all this whiskey, I don't need the samples. He's like, oh, you hold on to them. And I still have them 3 years later. I'm just like, well, they're getting worse and worse by the day, because it's, half, a third, a quarter left. But at the same time, it's amazing to sit there and go, this is an experimental bit of Yamazaki and Hakushu. And it's incredible to be like, yeah, you're trying someone's experiment, not someone's finished product as well, which I love that mindset of like, this is going into something else, this is special. So it's incredible. But
that is a lot of fun, getting a taste, sort of not just work in progress, but component of the some of the parts approach. And it's rare that gets to happen. And I was lucky enough to do something similar at Loch Lomond Distillery last year, and that was fantastic, just of tasting parts that went into to a malt.
Because they've got
13 different whiskeys.
13
different spirits they produce. I actually did the same thing when I was there in July, Matt. It was
you were there.
Incredible, such an incredible experience to just taste these odd components. It's wild.
No one has asked Matt, what have you opened up that's pretty
special?
SMWS cask number,
what do I open? I opened a couple of festival bottlings because...
What have you got that isn't festival bottlings? Let's try that way instead.
Yeah.
Because they're all gone, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, well, okay. Well, I opened a couple of Heartwoods I hadn't been sitting on for ages. And so that was, one I've been sitting on, when I say ages, for about 48 hours. And then another one which had been out for a few years ago. And actually I opened some old Armagnacs, which I normally, I had been sitting around. I was like, and I was like, it's just, I've been cracking things open all around the place. But also I've actually been using this opportunity, much like you guys. I'll have to take a photo sometime. I've got a drawer. It's like a big wooden drawer, and there'd be somewhere between 150 to 200 samples in there. And they're all things that have been, again, sent to me, or bits and bobs traded and whatever. And I never, ever get around to them. And so it's been an opportunity to kill off some of those samples, kill off some of the bottles with a thumb left in them each kind of thing. It's like there's 3 or 4 drams left in them. So that's where I've been at. It's been more sort of bottle killing rather than opening anything spectacular. I mean, it's, I've opened maybe half a dozen things in the last 2 months, but it's more sort of a case of.
And some of those samples are crazy. Like I remember when I was moving house, there was something I held on to, and it was a customer of ours when I was working at the Whisky Exchange. So I was living in the UK. He lived in Holland, I believe. And he talked about wanting to come along, and I sort of gave him all this advice and help and some information. It was kind of a continuous conversation all the way up to him come to the show. And then he rocks up and he's like, "Oh, hi, I'm Bram. It's good to meet you." I was like, "Oh, good to meet you." He's like, good to put a name to the face of conversations for the last 6 months. He's like, yeah. He's like, "These are for you," and just handed me probably 4 sample bottles. And one was his own whiskey blend. It's just like Bram's whiskey blend. I was like, who knows what that is. And then there was a vintage Glengarry and a couple of other bits, but it was just.
Was it just one of those terrible infinity bottles, but with a name on it?
Yeah.
No, because like it turns out he's an insane collector. And so he just sort of went, oh, thanks for helping me out. Here's 4 really cool things. And yeah, I kind of not really knowing, I was quite early in my career at that time as well in whiskey geekdom. And I kind of put them in the cupboard and was just like, I'm going to hold on to that. Who knows? And when I went to move, I actually opened them all up and tasted them. So no, these deserve to be tasted because he's remained a friend for years. And I tried them. I was like, shit, these are really good. It was like, this isn't some stranger just going, here, try my whiskey. It's lovely. I was like, no, this is top stuff. That you've actually effort has gone into this.
Yeah,
that's
it's
awesome.
one of those things. Like they just like those small sample bottles, the miniatures, they just like amass over time. You know, when we were clearing out my grandmother's house, I inherited like a whole bunch of teeny tiny miniatures, including a little bottle of Glenlivet 12-year-old that looks like it's from the 70s. Half of it's like evaporated. It's hilarious, and I'll never open it because it'll taste like shit. But you know, even my local organic cafe owner, he's like, hey, you know, drop some bottles off to him. He's like, hey, I've got this bottle of Johnny Walker Black Label from like a very, very long time ago. I'm thinking of cracking it open. Do you want some? I was like, yes. Yes. He reckons it's like 30 years old. He's like, I bought it ages ago for like $10. It was nothing, you know? And you just amass those friends and you just amass this collection of miniatures and you're like, oh my God.
It's totally a first world problem, isn't it?
It is the worst.
Laura, do you see much in the way of miniatures and like even like miniature collecting in the agave world? I'm so insulated from that. I don't really see it or know about it. Sorry.
I mean, the little sample bottles that get shared around, absolutely you see.
Yeah, sure.
It's less seen here in Australia because simply through proximity and how much people actually travel between. But in the States, you see it a lot. Like everyone kind of has like the still strength sample juices, or like this is something that was has come out of the barrel, or this is something that has like some like straight off the still. This one was taken out on just the first run. You get a lot of first run mezcal that gets shared around for a bit of fun, which will blow your head off.
Oh right, like 4 shots and faints kind of drinking kind of grade. Right. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, there's especially like within Oaxaca, it's like Oaxaca has a few different valleys, and all up each different valley, all the different producers have like when we think producers, we think like distillery-ish, like a built essentially a building or stills and whatnot. But when you get into mezcal country, often it is literally like some stone walls held up with some tin on the top, and you'll have clay pots with like a fire running underneath it, and they don't necessarily have a crusher. Often you'll literally see 2 guys like smashing the cooked agave with mallets and then putting it into a pot, and it's rustic on a whole different level to what we're used to seeing with other spirits.
Yeah. One of my favorite things I've ever seen for a mezcal producer is them fermenting agave in an animal hide that they just killed. It was just like this cow that had just been hollowed out and strung up, and they were fermenting agave in that. And it was a horrifying image, but
delicious.
I tasted the agave that was produced, the spirit that was produced from that, and it was fucking incredible. But
so people often chastise the SWA for having rules. You know what? You know what? Sometimes I'm happy with that.
I think know there's no legal thing saying not suitable for vegans on the bottom.
Not suitable for human consumption.
To be fair, the animal in the fermentation or the distilling process in mezcal is not uncommon.
Yeah, absolutely, it's not.
Andy, someone wants to know what you were grabbing off the shelf.
It was, I'll reach. Dublin Liberties Copper Alley. It's a 10-year-old Irish whiskey.
Irish whiskey.
Sherry cask. It's really tasty. It's just next door to Teeling Distillery. They opened as a distillery in February this last year. And so at the moment, all the liquid is sourced as is to be expected.
Yeah.
But they're making their own liquid, and they're master distillers, ex Bushmills of I think 19 years or something. So
that's a region we're going to see boom in the next few years, isn't it? Really.
I know. I'm super excited to see Irish whiskey come to its fruition after the last 30, 40 years of building the industry again.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks to the likes of obviously the key players that we already know, the Bushmills and the Coolies of the world, but I'm also looking forward to the Waterfords and the Teelings and all that kind of stuff popping out over the years coming up.
It's a fascinating history as well. It's I was running a training today for all our team on whiskey history and kind of focusing mainly on Scotland for them, just because you got to pick something, and you can't do the whole world in half an hour. But I was talking about the sort of would have been mid 1800s. Where there was taxation laws introduced into Scotland, and they went from over 1,200 distilleries, and about 930 disappeared the next day. Because the taxman came in and said, you must register yourself as a distillery to follow the rules. And so they're like, no, we've gone. We're not here. We're not making whiskey anymore. And Scotland kind of rode that wave because that's why when you look at regions of Scotland, it's Kintyre, it's Glenlivet, and it's Islay, because you could hide from the taxman.
Exactly.
It's the fascinating thing about spirits is always look at the taxman, and you'll learn the most about spirits. I think for agave, what's
cartels?
Pardon?
The TRC.
Yeah, Ricea means medicine, isn't it? Yeah. Because they realized that when you said, we're making mezcales, they're like, well, you're making liquor. And they're like, I don't know, Ricea. It's like, medicine. Okay, yeah, fine. and off you go. And it was the same. So, Scotland hid, and, that's why we have all the glens for all the whiskies, is because they're hiding from the taxman. Ireland didn't ride that wave so well. And obviously, you then have prohibition and various wars and all that sort of stuff that kind of happened as a result afterwards. But it was interesting that you have this taxation law. I think they went from 128 to 28 in a day, and they actually went to 28. It wasn't a case of like in Scotland where they hid
100 distilleries. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, 100 distilleries actually just went, now we're out, and disappeared. And it was one of the
There's a question toughest. Here from Regan, who asks, are there small distilleries, are there small Irish distilleries, or is it all large scale? I'll just jump in there and say, no, there are small Irish distilleries, but they're not all Bushmill sized distilleries. If that's they do sort of vary in size. You'd know a fair bit about this, Andy, as well, but
so I think it was 2014, 2016 was where it started to really pick up. So we've always had the big four. So Tullamore Dew, Bushmills, Middleton, and the other one.
The Great Northern.
And they've been the kind of the giants and the pioneers of Irish whiskey for
40 years
decades now. But as I think it was 2016, there were 8 new distilleries that put through for a license, and that was kind of the beginning of that resurgence and that rise. And I think we're now at 32 actual distilleries or permits for distillation in Ireland.
That almost wraps into sort of where we were, what we were sort of discussing before about. I think we're going to see. I think that's kind of one of the exciting things we're going to see, especially on back bars and hell, maybe on rails as well. But most like we're going to see a sort of that change in selection unless under contract.
Yeah,
we're going to see.
I think, and we're coming up to the point.
Back to the future of our subject, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we're coming back to the point where actually distilleries are actually coming up with liquid, because it's only 5 years ago that this resurgence started, and for most of these they've not got liquid ready to bottle and produce. So this kind of thing of and I think it's quite a bad way of looking at it. I think it's a very negative way of looking at it. But when people sit there and go, "Oh, but it's not your own liquid."
Oh, look,
I
don't think it's.
of course it's not. It's just like we don't have 250 years.
That's the purest cop out. Laura, in your case, are you going to? Is that? I'm just going to refer back to your knowledge and expertise and wisdom in the China market. Is that something that you think you're going to see? Maybe adopting that sort of that new world of distilleries opening up across Ireland, or is it's going to be down to the big players, as you said before?
Sorry, how do you mean? Like, as in, like, distilleries opening up within China, or the Irish coming across, like Irish?
Well, that's a good one as well. But yeah, it could be distilleries opening up in China. I mean, I remember watching that film about the replication of wineries. What was that called? Red Circle, Red Bottle. Anyway, narrated by Russell Crowe. I can remember that much.
Interesting choice.
Where there were some wealthy Chinese billionaires who replicated famous French wineries and built them in China. I can't remember the name of the doco. It was like Red Obsession. That was it. That was called. Anyway, did you see something like that even happening for some of the superstar spirit brands, not just whiskey, of course, but superstar spirit brands across the world?
In regards to the Irish whiskey side of it, it's starting to get a foothold, like it's starting to get a bit of a presence. Summergate bring Teeling in, and I think that besides Jameson, Teeling's probably the most present Irish whiskey brand within China. But again, it's quite like it's very much a focus on Japanese, Scotch, or like there's some Taiwanese whiskies that are becoming popular within China as well.
Sure.
But in regards to like the different, like within products being produced in China, some of the big brands are actually in the process of building distilleries and finding their own foothold. Like I
saw some huge announcement from Pernod Ricard about a year ago about their development into a distillery in China.
Yeah, ABI is also doing one.
Okay.
And who else is doing one? There's a few popping up in different locations. There's some that are like there's a lot of experimentation going on in regards to like temperature and region, because there is such a broad variance in types or in like climate across China. So there's a lot being done kind of in the mid to highlands sort of area, because you can find spaces within China that do mimic the Scottish Highlands in regards to climate. Further south, it's a lot more tropical.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of like climate focus and trying to figure out what's going to work best at the moment.
I think actually I have a question for you, Laura. Do you think if something like that happens, if China does create their own kind of, a national whiskey or whatever it is of sorts, do you think it'll be a similar situation to like Officer's Choice in India? Do you think it'll then kind of exclude a large part of the Western market in terms of spirits import?
I don't think so. I think so. At the moment, Baijiu is king. Like the international spirits market within China only makes up 3% of spirits drunk.
Yeah.
And China is most spirits largest market already, and that's only making up 3%.
Yeah.
So when it comes to actually creating, yes,
Keep going.
When it comes to creating a spirit, it is going to be designed for a Chinese palate, which is quite different.
Yeah.
I wanted to
Continue, Andy.
Sorry, I just want to interject on Officer's Choice. It's something I've been reading about just recently about this negativity, a lot with India in the way that they put a massive export tax on any other spirit coming from other countries coming into India, and so domestic spirit is king in India, and when you've got the second biggest population, that's why you've got the biggest production of whatever you have. But it was really interesting kind of reading more into it and sort of digging a bit deeper, because the logic behind the whiskey side of things, and why is it that most whiskey in India is molasses based rather than malt based, is actually because, from what I'm starting to read, it's actually something to do. It's more to do with the poverty levels of India and the requirement of grain for food. And so there was a negativity when distilleries started kind of pushing more towards using grain, and apparently there was this negativity towards people using grain, because it's like, actually, you shouldn't be using this for a luxury item. You should be using this to feed the many. And so there was this sort of prejudice of, if you use grain in your products, it's like, Jesus, it's like, you're, how dare you? That's something that the country needs. And so that's why whiskey, it shouldn't be called whiskey, obviously, we all know that, but
Absolutely.
it's interesting. It was interesting to sort of see it from that perspective. Actually, we're looking at it as they're creating it to a way that pleases their country and satisfies the needs of their country. And so much the same as Baiju. Baiju's king, because that's what you've got abundance of. It's like, it's in the same. Japan produces something like 10% of the amount of barley that is required for the whiskey that Japan consumes, produces.
Absolutely.
Like only about 10% of the barley is coming from Japan, because the popularity and the demand is so high, and Japan is a barley producing country.
Exactly.
So they have to get it in from somewhere else. And so this logical thing of, why is American whiskey made of rye and why is it made of corn? It's because the Europeans settled there. It was like, oh, rye grows really well here. Cool, we'll grow rye. And corn grows really well here. We'll grow corn.
So that goes back to the discussion of sort of it needs to be, it's the reason for being argument again. It's using the resources that you have rather than the ones you need to import to a large extent, and creating for the palate and market that suits. And that's why I think there's an Australian palate. And I think that Australian palate has been largely dictated by the wine market, if I'm being honest. I think the wine market controls that in Australia. And I think in other markets, obviously wine is going to be huge in other markets and beer is going to be huge in others. Of course, Australia is big in wine and beer, of course, but I think the wine market controls the palate for what we see in spirits. Would be in a lot of countries, I'm sure.
Everything I hear here is, it's just like, I want a big sherry cask or a big wine cask.
It's going to be big. It's going to be massive.
And I'm like, this is an amazing ex-bourbon cask. And he's like,
I'm not interested. I think that's a bit of a shame ever, is that we have like what I like to call Robert Parker palettes, and we end up with every wine's got to be these 100 out of 100 big bold Shiraz kind of flavors, these big spicy rich bold Shiraz flavors in wine. Meanwhile, people love to shit on things like white wines from the Hunter Valley or something, because it's like, oh, that's not cool because it's Hunter Valley and it's not Barossa Reds or something. So anyway, I'm going to go completely off topic, and I think we'll have to call it a night shortly. I don't think there's any other questions coming in from anyone. Sam Licardi says sample bottles may be one of the best perks of being a BA. There was actually a comment that Andy, you wandered off for a moment. There was a comment here which I think you've already seen. He says that Andy Milne, that beard is majestic. So you get beard of the night. Well done. I like his beard. Yes. I'm for it.
I'm sadly a very long way away from my barber. So I get my hair cut at the barber shop, in the CBD. But it is a good 15 kilometers from my house. And so while I'm in isolation, I'm keen not to get on public transport and not to get in the cab just for the sake of getting a haircut. So
no, I'm that's right. I'm also overdue here.
I feel bad for the day that I walk in there and see them having not had my haircut for, we're coming up 2 months now. And so I do feel bad for the job that they have to do when I walk in and say,
look, there's a lot of
repair 3 months of damage. Go.
At the moment, but if you want my stock tip, invest in hairdressers. There you go. That's all we've got time for tonight. Thank you so much. I want to do a special thanks to Emma, Alex, Andy, Lockie, Laura, special guest Laura tonight. Thank you so much for joining us, Laura. Really great to connect with you and hear your insights on everything we discussed. Thank you so much. And of course, Roundtable Week 6 will be back next Wednesday night. I believe your hosting chair will be Wednesday night. Wednesday night is the next one. It's Wednesday tonight. Today's Wednesday, by the way, everyone. In case you're watching.
Do we get Scotty back next week?
Yeah, we might get Scotty back next week. See how we go. He's been a bit under the radar. He's taken a bit of leave, and he's put me looking after things here, which is dangerous enough. Thank you, everyone, so much.
Back.
We'll all be back. I'll see you all. Thank you again to everyone who tuned in. Thanks for all the great questions, everyone, and we'll see you all next week for Roundtable. SMWS goes live with Alex Darlenberg, who's right here tomorrow night for a special appearance, and we're going to have a great chat tomorrow night. Thank you, everyone, so much, and we'll see you soon.
Bye,
See you later.
Bye, everyone. Thanks so much.